Thank you very much, Robert, and thank you very much. I'm really honored to be invited here today to be able to share with you my thoughts on political communication in the digital sphere. I'm not an academician, but I have focused on the role of media in political communication for the last 20 years as a researcher and practitioner, working on various media monitoring projects, primarily during elections. As such, what I would like to share with you today are actually my practical experiences in the framework of election observation missions of the OSCE, ODHR, and other international organizations, as well as my most recent work in the area of the role of social media during elections. Let me start by giving you some statistics and comparisons. Worldwide, there are some 2.2 billion people who use Facebook, which is about a number of conventional followers of Christianity. There are about 1.8 billion users of YouTube, which is about the number of conventional followers of Islam. Millennials check their phones approximately 150 times per day. While there are apparently no precise dates determining who should be included in the group of millennials, when it comes to my age, a brief look at my hair indicates that I'm not in that group anymore. However, when it comes to checking my phone, I am definitely a millennial, as well as my 3 kids. The only normal person in my family is my wife, whose usage of the phone is much more measured. She usually checks the phone a few times per day, and about half of the times when she's trying to find it. The above-mentioned numbers demonstrate to what extent the social media intruded our lives. Now, do they threaten democracy? Let me share with you my thoughts on how has the role of mass media in political communication changed in recent years, and what implications do these changes have on democratic institutions. There is no doubt that the role of media in providing access for political contestants to communicate their messages and in presenting news about political parties, political leaders, and matters of political importance is vital for the integrity of the electoral process as we gain the essential information about politics through mass media. In addition, through reporting on the performance of incumbents, providing a platform for debates among candidates, allowing candidates to communicate their message to the electorate, and reporting on campaign developments, the media should inform voters on how to exercise their rights, monitor the electoral process, and report on the results to the public. Various types of media are under different obligations when it comes to election-focused reporting, but in general, the international norms and standards foresee that media give equitable access to election contestants so that they can convey their messages to voters and provide the electorate with ample information based on which they could make an informed, intelligent choice at the ballot box. At least this is how we have seen the role of media up until now. But we have to acknowledge that the media landscape has changed significantly in the last few years, particularly given the expanding internet media and the rapidly growing role of social media. There are growing concerns that the changing media landscape and the expansions of internet media has changed the impact of media on the democratic decision-making process. New media is a broad term that describes a range of media that are utilized for many different purposes, consisting of the internet, mobile phones, social media networks, such as blogs, microblogs, social networking websites, video sharing sites, and others. Unlike traditional media, new media are usually interactive. They use digital, online, and mobile technology and are often audience-created and user-driven. In addition, they function in real time, are usually borderless, and more difficult to regulate. The line between traditional media and social media is often blurred, with most traditional journalists using the internet as the key source of information for stories, and many traditional media creating online editions or transforming into fully multimedia outlets. Moreover, traditional media also utilize citizen journalism pieces and rely on personal mobile phone images and video to cover certain stories where they do not have their own reporters. The rise of new media provides further possibilities for participatory citizenry, information and knowledge sharing, inclusion and empowerment. Both traditional and new media can play a vital watchdog role and serve as campaign platform, a forum for public debate, and as a public educator, ultimately strengthening democracy. At the same time, however, new media, and we have already heard about this from the previous speakers, can pose serious challenges to the integrity of election process, mainly due to certain facts that I will focus on now, including the emergence of so-called fake news. Now, is fake news a new phenomenon? Not really. When it comes to digital disinformation, I think it's just an old wine in a new bottle. It has been around since news became a concept more than 5 centuries ago when Gutenberg developed a printing system. It should be also mentioned that the concept of fake news has been here a lot longer than the concept of verified and objective news, which emerged about a century ago. It appears that with the emergence of social media, we have entered a new phase, which I would call a world of alternative facts, in which hoaxes spread with scary speed and invite angry reactions from people who take what they read for granted. If I'm not mistaken, it was Mark Twain who once said, "A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes." From the start, fake news has tended to be sensationalist and extreme, designed to inflame emotions and prejudices. What has changed now is the form of how disinformation is spread. I will give you an example. I worked in 1999 in Ukraine, focusing on how the media covered the presidential election. There was little doubt that the then incumbent president, Leonid Kuchma, would be re-elected in the polls, something which was repeatedly presented by most of the nationwide media. Among a very few exceptions was a newspaper called Silsky Visty. Maybe our Ukrainian colleagues would remember this, and I think it still exists, this newspaper. The translation would be agricultural news. Now, this newspaper, it had about 600,000 copies as for circulation. And this paper offered some platform to Kuchma's opponents, known as Kani 4, and so there were usually positive stories about these opposition candidates and very negative stories about the incumbent president Kuchma. One day, I come to work, I open this newspaper, and what I see, I thought that the world has turned upside down, because I suddenly see very negative stories for these opposition people and some positive stories about Kuchma. And I was trying to find out what is happening, you know. First, I thought it's my Russian. That is the problem, you know. Wrong. It's not perfect, but I can understand, I can read. Second thought was perhaps I'm reading a wrong newspaper. Wrong. This was exactly the copy of Silsky Visti newspaper. Later, I found out that someone had printed 500,000 fake copies of this newspaper, you know, which were exactly the same as the original. The only difference was the content, yeah? And so, for me, this was probably the first experience which I had with fake news about candidates, or to be actually more precise, a fake newspaper. Now, if you consider the number of copies printed, 500,000, obviously it was clear that it must have been someone very rich who first of all decided to print so many fake copies, but still the audience was limited. Imagine these days using social media, if you have a fake story which can reach millions of people within a few seconds. I think this is something that we have to take into consideration. According to a report by Freedom House published in 2017, manipulation and disinformation tactics played an important role in elections in at least 17 other countries than US in 2016, damaging citizens' ability to choose their leaders based on factual news and authentic debate. The report further highlights that over the last few years, the practice has become significantly more widespread and technically sophisticated, with bots, propaganda producers, and fake news outlets exploiting social media and search algorithms to ensure high visibility and seamless integration with trusted content. It is of concern that the effects of these rapidly spreading techniques on democracy and civil activism are potentially devastating. It should be mentioned that these actions contribute to declining confidence in international alliances and organizations, public institutions, and mainstream media. The main goal appears to be destroying trust, polluting the information space, and attempting to destroy public discourse and democratic institutions. According to another research conducted by the Oxford University, political campaign, governments, and regular citizens around the world are employing both people and bots in attempts to artificially shape public life. The researchers consider computational propaganda to be a phenomenon connected with recent digital disinformation and manipulation efforts, and define it as the use of algorithm, automation, and human creation to purposefully distribute misleading information over social media networks. Computational propaganda involves learning from and mimicking real people so as to manipulate public opinion across a diverse range of platforms and device networks. In their description of bots, the Oxford research indicates that bots are automated programs integral to the spread of computational propaganda and intended to perform simple, repetitive, robotic tasks. Moreover, bots are used to computationally enhance the ability of humans to get work done online. Social media bots are automated identities that can do routine tasks like collect information, but they can also communicate with people and systems. They are deployed to do legitimate jobs like delivering news and information. They are also used for more malicious activities associated with spamming and harassment. Whatever their use is, they are able to rapidly deploy messages, interact with other users' content, and affect trending algorithms, all while passing as human users. Political bots, social media bots, are used for political manipulation, are also effective tools for strengthening online propaganda and hate campaigns. One person or a small group of people can use an army of political bots on Twitter to give the illusion of large-scale consensus. It should be mentioned that autocratic regimes use political bots to silence opponents and to push official state messaging. Moreover, political bots have been used during elections to influence the vote or defame opponents. The research also warns that anonymous political actors harness key elements of computational propaganda, such as false news reports, coordinated disinformation campaigns, and troll mobs to attack human rights defenders, civil society groups, and journalists. Computational propaganda is one of the most powerful new tools against democracy. The responsible journalism practiced in traditional media include a filter in the form of editorial decisions, attempting to prevent information pollution and offering people news which are relevant and important for their ability to make informed choices. This type of model doesn't seem to work in the online media world yet. Quite the opposite. People tend to click more on articles which contain conspiracies, hoaxes, lies. This is another big challenge for traditional journalism, the fact that social media platforms have swallowed much of the advertising revenues that once kept traditional media companies afloat. According to a recent article in The Guardian, by acting like technology companies while in fact taking on the role of publishers, Google, Facebook, and others have accidentally designed a system that elevates the cheapest and most engaging content at the expense of more expensive but less spreadable material. Anyone who wants to reach 1 million people with a poorly produced conspiracy theory video is in luck. If, however, you want to run a well-resourced newsroom covering a city of 200,000 people, that is not going to be sustainable. It is relevant to ask a question: to what extent have the mentioned changes in advertising encouraged the growth of disinformation? We know of examples when spreading fake news to attract more hits to websites became profitable during previous elections. The word platform suggests that the big tech companies act in a passive way, posting information they receive and not themselves influencing what we see or what we don't want to see. This is not true. The big tech companies do control what we see by the very business model. They want to engage us from the very moment we log on their sites into their applications in order to generate revenue from the adverts that we see. There are other challenges brought by the new media environment, most notably by social media during elections. These include inflammatory and hostile language, lack of good quality reporting, and analytical coverage. Moreover, perhaps more invasive than disinformation is the relentless targeting of hyper-partisan views which play to the fears and prejudices of people in order to influence their voting intention and their behavior. We are also faced with a crisis concerning the use of our personal data, including its manipulation for malicious purposes. There is a general lack of meaningful debate, with internet users being split in filter bubbles of like-minded people who are locked into echo chambers that reinforce their own biases. These trends contribute to the decrease in critical thinking among audiences. I consider disinformation created for profit or other gain, disseminated through state-sponsored programs, or spread through the deliberate distortion of facts by groups with a particular agenda, including the desire to affect elections, a serious problem with negative implications on democratic institutions. There is yet another new phenomenon which I want to mention. While according to various surveys, television still remains the main source of political information during elections, social media are gradually increasing their impact on the public opinion. They enable political parties and candidates to pass on their messages directly to the electorate and act as means for their supporters to disseminate these messages. The influence can affect the voters' decision-making behavior by the content shared about candidates on social networks. Candidates can also use social media more personally to reach their followers, as we can see with Donald Trump in the States, or, for example, with Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. They both use Twitter accounts to create a one-on-one connection with their supporters. Let's have a quick look at this kind of direct political communication. In a recent article on the upcoming midterm elections in the US, New York Times wrote that social media has been Trumpified. Political groups and candidates, whether for city council or for the Senate, are imitating President Trump's raw and combative language style online. Many are attaching themselves to contentious national issues like illegal immigration, which tend to gather more attention online than narrower local issues. Another tactic is giving their opponents mocking Trump-style nicknames. For example, Senator Claire McCaskill, Democrat of Missouri, has been called Crooked Claire and a Millionaire Claire by two Republican groups opposing her candidacy. It should be mentioned that Facebook and Twitter are filled with attacks that rely on similar formula, inflammatory rhetoric combined with nicknames. Primitive anger travels further online than inspirational messages, and the way to get noticed on the internet is to be loud and provocative. This is what Trump did during the 2016 elections, when his tactics was to utilize such methods to steal the public attention. The mentioned examples also show that the pressure to perform on social media makes candidates move towards more polarizing topics and avoid talking of real policy issues, such as, for example, the healthcare or economy, which would not be so popular on social media. It remains to be seen if the negative nicknames and provocative campaign messages, apart from getting more attention, will help candidates to connect with their voters. Given the existing legal gaps, the various forms of malicious online communication endanger the smooth and fair conduct of the electoral process and ultimately the democracy itself. As already mentioned, there is sufficient proof that autocratic regimes and anonymous stakeholders use social media to manipulate public opinion with false news, coordinated disinformation campaigns, and trolls or bots to attack not only candidates in the opposing camp, but also human rights defenders, civil society groups, and journalists. Moreover, even though recent research seems to show that social media users are exposed to more diverse information sources than those not using online sources, filter bubbles and echo chambers may hamper the potential benefits of such positive exposure, fragment information flow, and undermine internet users' ability to think critically, thus reinforcing their prejudices. As the recent experience with elections in different countries shows, the growing distrust of the public toward mainstream political parties could result in people voting for populist and more radical alternatives. As such, our democracies are at risk, and now it's time to act to protect our shared values and the integrity of our democratic institutions. For conclusion, in my view, the good quality journalism is the best response to the emergence of fake news and disinformation. It is important, first of all, to provide more support to the existing functioning models which prove to be successful. We should not forget that information remains to be a valuable asset, and it appears that the media sector is currently not capable to fully monetize its value. I believe that the current crisis of confidence in the traditional concept of media is an opportunity to reinforce the role of and mission of the public service media. High quality, credible, trustworthy information is a cornerstone of a strong democracy. Thank you very much.